Good morning.
Awesome. Go Detroit Lions.
Not so much. Not this year.
My wife and I have been speaking at marriage conferences for 18 years.
Yep.
We started when we were just married 5 years. We didn't know anything. We knew absolutely nothing whatsoever. But we started speaking, and it's through those 18 years we both have made observations, not only about marriage, but about dating. A lot of people who attend our conferences are dating or just engaged. So there's two observations about Biola. One, there's not a lot of dating that happens here at Biola. We're not going to talk about that because, to be honest, we have nothing to say about that. We have no answer for that. I would say just pray. That's all I would say is So we're not going to address that one, but when people do date at Biola, our observation has been that people move at light speed, that they go very quickly towards commitment. But where should we get advice about relationships? That's an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah. And you know, you're all college students, so you know how to do research. So probably one of the things you do is you Google it, right?
Yes.
Do you have your...
Yes. Thank you. Wow, Ann, that was good.
Thank you. So you Google it, you try to see what's out there. Well, you know, if you Google dating advice, you get 227 million options. So that's probably too much, right? I mean, how do you...
You know what, Bud, your mic is
I'm out.
cutting out.
There we go.
That's not me, by the way. I'm not doing any of that.
Handheld?
Should you do handheld? Should we go to handheld?
If I need to use it, let me know.
Yeah,
I'd
it's
rather
not on.
Are we good? The switch?
Wait, her switch? You want me to switch her on?
Oh, Lord. Could this go any worse?
I am so dead right now.
Can we start over?
She's yeah, like Denver. Yeah. That was a fumble right there. That was
a bad start. Okay.
Are you good?
I think I'm okay. If I'm okay, I'll switch over. So.
All right.
Okay, so yeah, Google, but just too much information, right? Too much. So you might try to...
Who are you talking to? No, go ahead. Go ahead. Next.
Okay, so Google's not going to help too much, right? Too much information. So what do you want to look at next? Maybe Wikipedia, right? Look up what is dating in Wikipedia. And they've got a definition up there. It's not horrible, but it's probably not the best thing either. I'm going to go ahead and go to the handheld. But it might not be the best thing for you. And probably your professors have told you that Wikipedia is not a reliable source of information, right?
That's right.
So, did you know that if you were a student at Biola in 1963, you could have turned to the student handbook? Because the student handbook actually talks about dating. And this is what it says. Listen. I love this. It says, under the section called dates, it says, and what about dates? Of course you are interested. Freshman girls will ask permission of their house mothers during the first year. Transfer students only during the first semester. And it defines dates. It says a date is, in this case, it refers to going off campus with a fellow, whether by couple or in a group. And of course, and such permission is not necessary for activities on campus. So if it were only that simple that we could get that kind of a definition today.
Well, let's consider a different source. Let's take a look at what the book of Proverbs would say about our emotions within relationships. The book of Proverbs says, watch over your heart with all diligence, for from it flow the springs of life. Put away from you a deceitful mouth and put devious speech far from you, and let your gaze be fixed straight in front of you and watch the path of your feet. The word heart in Hebrew doesn't just mean your emotions, it means all of you. For certain, it is emotions, but it's also your intellect, it's your will, it's your physical being, and watching over your heart in this sense is really watching over your life. The reward of that will be that your life will resemble springs of living water. Now, in a desert region, if you had flowing springs of water, that was life-sustaining. So what this proverb is saying is, watch over your life for two reasons. One, you will create a path by the decisions you make. And second, if you do it correctly, if you watch over your heart, you will be rewarded with a qualitatively rich and fulfilling life. Just like there's no one writer of the book of Proverbs, it was written in a Jewish community, we're not just going to borrow from biblical wisdom here, but we're going to borrow from communication scholars who have studied relationships for a very long time, and they have identified 3 different factors that move us very quickly into relationships, and we want to take a look at each one of those.
So the first one we want to talk about is ambiguity. You know, once a relationship moves past sort of that casual acquaintance, it's bound to have some ambiguity to it. Is this one cutting out too?
No, keep going.
Okay. And so anyway, it's inevitable. It might be a little bit uncomfortable, but ambiguity is inevitable. And you know, it is not unique to Biola. Just 2 weeks ago in USA Today, they did an article that asked the question, could dating get any more confusing? In a survey of 2,647 singles aged 18 to 54, 69% said that they are at least somewhat confused as to whether any given outing with a potential romantic partner is a date or not. Listen to what a first-year MBA student from Fordham University said. He said, it comes up often. I hope she doesn't think this is a date. I just want to have fun. And if it's someone that you've just met recently and consistently have one-on-one hangout sessions, that's sort of a date. Sort of a date. Yeah.
Wow.
So can you hear the ambiguity?
You know, we kind of laugh at him, but when we were writing this talk, we disagreed on what our first date was. Mm-hmm. And when we look back, I was counting it as a date much quicker than Noreen was counting it as a date. We were on staff with Campus Crusade for Christ at Miami of Ohio University in Oxford, Ohio, but we traveled once a week, thank you, we traveled once a week to Wright State University to help start the leadership there. And coming home, we'd often stop and catch a movie and have dinner, and you viewed that as
friends.
Yeah, just.
And you have to know, Oxford is a tiny little town. It's a college town. So when we would go to Wright State, that was in Dayton, that was a bigger city. And so there were things that we could do there that we couldn't do in Oxford, like, you know, go to the mall, do certain shopping. It had a big movie theater. We did not even have a big movie theater in Oxford at the time. Yeah. So for me, it was, we're friends, we're hanging out, and we're enjoying each other.
But I was viewing them as dates. A good friend of mine said, hey, who cares what you call it? It's obvious that you're interested in each other, you're spending time together. Don't rush that. Don't seek to define that. And one really funny story is, did we actually go on a date with Big? Was Big a date?
It wasn't a date, but we went together.
Okay. It was a date, okay? So we went and saw the movie Big. We saw Big with Tom Hanks. And so we see it. The next week, we're driving back to Wright State, and we pass a movie marquee, and it's Big, and I turn to Noreen, and I say, hey, have you seen Big? I think you'd really like it.
And I said, yeah, I saw it with you. So, you know, that's why I think it wasn't a date.
Now, here's the key point. Researchers point out with ambiguity, here's the key point. We hate ambiguity. We hate it being ambiguous between each other, so we rush past it. We are very uncomfortable with that stage. And more mistakes are made because we rush through ambiguity. But I want to ask the question, why do we hate the ambiguity of it? Mm-hmm. Is it self-esteem issues? Yeah, there's not a lot of dating that happens here at Biola, so when you're in a relationship, it's almost seen as, I can feel good about myself. I do find it amazing in my classes how many students who are in dating relationships find a way to kind of publicly announce that to the rest of the class. So sometimes, which is fine, but sometimes I think I can finally feel good about myself because I'm one of the few chosen people at Biola that's in a dating relationship. I think also you get social pressure. I think people see you hanging out with another person semi-regularly and they're saying, hey, what's up with you? What's up with you? And you want to answer that. I think maybe it's even parent pressures, like, hey, I sent you to Biola. There's never going to be There's never going to be a bigger pool of potential candidates. Please come out of Biola in a serious relationship. And when we spoke at Tory conferences, through the Alumni Association, we found out that what percentage of people met their spouse at Biola? It was minimal. It was like,
yeah.
I don't know.
I was thinking it was 20% or less.
Less than 20% you will meet your spouse here at Biola. So take the pressure off. It most likely is not going to happen here.
So, and as awkward as ambiguity may feel, you know, think about what's the alternative. Like, do you really want to have a DTR every time you get together? Like, and talk about, so, what are you thinking about the relationship? Well, let me tell you what I'm thinking about the relationship. I mean, how stifling and burdensome would that be to a growing relationship? And so it might be awkward, but it's something that when it is done well and done with integrity, it actually can be beneficial. Let's take a look at the next verse, and that is, put away from you a deceitful mouth and put dubious lips far from you. You know, so we're talking about guarding your heart, but you're also needing to be careful what you're doing to those around you, because it's not all about you. It's never all about you when it comes to the kingdom, right? And so not only are you guarding your own heart, but you want to be honest and you want to be kind in the words that you use with one another. Which also means it's okay at some point in this ambiguity to ask for clarification, to say, you know, this is what I'm thinking, what are you thinking?
Just keep going. It is, but it's okay. It's okay.
So anyway, because what we don't want to do is you don't want to carelessly mislead somebody else's heart. And even if the relationship doesn't progress to a romantic relationship, you always want to be guided by kingdom love.
And the Proverbs says, let your eyes look directly ahead to the path that you are creating. In communication theory, we call that feed forward. Anticipate the effect your words and actions are going to have on another person. So at the early stage where you're in an ambiguous state, don't always be touching each other and stuff like that, and don't always be overly complimenting each other. Do not write checks that you cannot cash. Don't back up your words with integrity. Don't just flirt with a person to see if I can get that person to be interested in me, and then I'll decide if I really want that person's heart. Next, we have momentum. Most relationship studies show go by leaps and bounds rather than small, purposeful steps. The reason that happens, I think, is we've been primed by culture to move very quickly into relationships. We call that priming.
You know, you think, oh, but I do want a relationship to be effortless and just mutual, and that just by looking at each other's eyes, we know what they're thinking. And there's something that's somewhat attractive to us, but we have to remind ourselves that that is completely unrealistic and just opens yourself up to great heartache.
Remember the University of Texas study?
Oh yeah, there was a study done by Dr. Ted Houston at the University of Texas. He actually spent 15 years studying the correlation between the length of a courtship and marital success. And one of the things that he said was the more passionate the courtship, the less likely the marriage is to last. Because he said that in an overly idyllic courtship, couples end up disillusioned.
Say that again, say it again.
In an overly idyllic courtship, couples end up disillusioned, and that often leads to marital problems.
So again, moving too quickly can be a huge problem. Moving slowly seldom causes problems in relationships. So it's not that we're opposed to passion, but passion with a short amount of time based on research can really set you up to move way too quickly and have future effects on your marriage if you were to get married.
Right, and passion within self-control.
Right. So I probably shouldn't have carried you out of that movie theater after Big, right?
Yeah, right. That wasn't me.
That wasn't me. Who was that? Then I wonder who that was. The next factor...
Moving on.
Moving on, the next factor is escalation. Charles Bolton, a communication theorist, identified escalation and said that they're premarital interaction patterns that move us towards commitment in marriage. He called them escalators.
Yeah, so think about an escalator. You know, you go to the mall, you get on the escalator, you just kind of step on. So it's minimal effort on your part, right? You just step on, and the escalator carries you away, drops you off at a completely different point. Well, that can be what it's like in relationships sometimes. When we step into these escalators, they begin to move us quickly toward marriage or a committed relationship. But the problem is there are some inherent dangers with an escalator that you need to be aware of, so you can be sure that you don't hurt yourself or hurt others around you.
Bolton identified 5 different escalators, but for the sake of time, we're only going to take a look at 2 of the escalators. One escalator was involvement. The level of involvement and how quickly that involvement happens. Now listen, when you're getting to know somebody, obviously you're excited to get to know that person, and obviously you'll make time in your busy schedule to get together with that person, of course. You might even arrange your schedules to get together with that person, or have routines in which you'll be in the same place at the same time. There's nothing wrong with that. However, when you're getting together with each other, what you're doing during that time can either have positive or negative effects. We argue that during that time, you need to practice 2 forms of chastity. The first form is emotional chastity.
Yeah, so when we think about emotional chastity or emotional purity, we know as Christians that there are physical boundaries on our relationships, but often we don't think about the emotional boundaries. And I do think that sometimes in trying to avoid getting too involved physically, we overcompensate by diving in too deeply emotionally. So we go very deep emotionally because we know the physical isn't an option. In every relationship, there's a certain amount of risk and about an amount of vulnerability. So what we're talking about is just using discretion, using discernment, using self-control in how much you share, with whom, and at what point in the relationship. But please hear this. When we talk about guarding your heart, we are not encouraging you to never open up your life, to protect your heart, to build a fortress around it. We're not talking about sort of this impenetrable wall, but more like the gatehouse. When you come into Biola, you've got the gatehouse. The gatehouse is just there. You pause. You let them know that you're a safe person. It's okay for you to be on campus, and they let you in. And so that's more what we're talking about, is like the gatehouse, that it is a pause to consider and evaluate if this is something that you should let into your heart. And especially as we talk about how the heart is defined as our will, our emotion, our intellect, it's our whole being. And if it's that important, and if from it flow the springs of life, then doesn't it make sense that we would be discerning as to what we let in?
In addition to emotional chastity, we need to think about physical chastity. Physical involvement is very important to think about and to pray about. And many Americans move way too quickly when it comes to the physical. The physical becomes a problem for at least 2 different reasons. One, we read a book called Hooked, about the hookup generation today, that shows physical expression way too quickly. And these neurologists were talking that your brain is actually flooded with chemicals when you touch each other, when you're physical with each other, and that your brain gets addicted to those chemicals and wants to reproduce those chemicals. From a communication standpoint, the problem with getting physical too early is that it clouds your perspective. Mm-hmm. At the very moment you need to be very objective and to analyze this relationship, you're now clouded for many reasons. One, you might have gone too far in the relationship, and now because of shame, you feel like, well, I got to stay in the relationship because I went too far, and now I'd feel like a total loser if we got out of the relationship because I kind of compromised in some areas. And also, physical involvement means that you are becoming one flesh with each other in certain aspects, depending on what you're doing, and now you are clouded to see the positive and the negatives about relationships. And this is what I really respect about Noreen. I was really ahead of her in the relationship. Noreen literally moved in next door in an apartment complex where we were on staff in Oxford, Ohio. When she moved in, I felt like the Holy Spirit said, this is not a drill, okay? I mean, I was very attracted to her. I was ahead of her. And so when we finally did start dating and prayed about it and thought about it, I was pretty quick to want to kiss her. And Noreen looked at me and she said, no, I think we really need to pray about that. And I was like, and fast about it, yes. Oh, absolutely, we should pray about it, yes. But you know what? That was so wise. How long do you think we waited?
Well, actually, because we were talking about this the other night at the class, and so I did kind of look I'm so sorry. I don't know what I'm doing.
Should we just pass this around?
Oh, I don't know.
Do you think? Yeah, let's do this.
Okay.
Can we do this? We are improvising. Oh, stop. No, I was thinking about just holding it.
Oh, well, I just put it on, so. Okay, so this is the deal. I kind of looked. You want me to hold it? Okay. So I checked it out, and from the time we started dating, it was a little over 6 months, I think, before we kissed.
6 months?
Yeah. And that was and when we started dating.
I didn't realize it.
Do you realize it was that long, or do you think it was longer?
No, I didn't realize it was that long.
Oh, yeah, it was. And when we started dating, it was after a long friendship. So when we started dating, it wasn't sort of this like, are we going to date? It was, we made the decision to date. So from that point.
We had the huge benefit of working together. And that was really huge because we saw each other on good days, bad days. We saw each other in stressful situations. And so I did react kind of weird when Noreen said, let's pray about it. I was a little bit embarrassed that I didn't think of that. But I thought, yeah, okay. So, and it was so wise because honestly, when we started kissing, well, it was so funny. Noreen said to me, I now feel like it's okay that you could kiss me. She didn't even finish the sentence. Is that not true?
That's true. But I need to take the mic.
Yes, you need to.
But here's the point. It's so much easier. It's not easier. It takes discipline, but to move slowly than it is to ever try to pull back. Yeah. And so by sort of moving into emotional involvement slowly, moving into physical involvement slowly, it's much easier than that than diving in and ever having to retract.
And the last escalator he talks about is idealization, where you just don't look for the negatives of that person. For whatever reason, you feel like, hey, I'm finally in a relationship, and I feel so good about this relationship, I don't want to see the negative. Or physical or emotional commitment has caused you to turn a blind eye to the negatives in a relationship. There's a communication theorist named John Gottman who came up with this idea of front stage, backstage. Front stage is when you know you have an audience. So obviously Noreen and I know that we're a married couple speaking in front of undergrads, and so this is front stage activity. It's really important though that you see the backstage activity. And so idealization, and by the way, living together forces you into an almost completely front stage performance because now you're on show 24/7. So you need to know that person you're dating. You need to see positive and negatives, front stage, backstage of that particular person, which leads us to what we do in premarital counseling.
Okay. One of the first things we do when we meet with a couple that's thinking about getting married is we ask them to come up with the 5 things that they love about that person. 5 things that they admire, 5 qualities that just drew them into the relationship. And then the next thing they have to do is come up with 3 things that cause them concern. 3 weaknesses, 3 potential problems for conflict or difficulty. Because we never want a couple to move toward marriage without knowing the front stage and the backstage. And if they can't come up with at least 3 things that cause them concern, that's a huge red flag for us, because that makes us think they probably don't know each other well enough if they can't come up with at least 3 things that cause them some concern.
Yeah, we would not marry a couple, suggest that they get married if they did not identify 3 concrete red flags. If you're not aware of those red flags, you're not ready to get married yet. Which kind of brings us to, the show that we sort of kind of pick on.
Yeah, well, The Bachelor, okay? I know a lot of you watch it and you like it, and there's some fun aspects to it, but just realize that this is the epitome of front stage. These people are performing for a camera. They are trying to outshine their competitors to win the Bachelor's heart. This is front stage. And, it's no wonder that 22 out of 26 of the couples that have participated in The Bachelor or The Bachelorette have broken up. After pledging their life and love to each other at the finale, they've broken up. And often it's been a very ugly and painful breakup.
By the way, I look pretty good with hair. In conclusion, here's what we're saying. We're saying simply be wise. Know that the decisions you make have ramifications and they create a path that you're going to walk down, and so is that person with you. So consult the book of Proverbs to say, guard your heart, guard your life, make wise decisions, because it will make a path, good path or bad path, and we just need to be wise enough to know where we're taking this relationship, and are we ready to take it in that direction. So here's what we'd like to do. We'd like to pray a blessing over you from the book of Proverbs. So if you would, put yourself in a position to receive a blessing from the book of Proverbs, maybe hands open, eyes closed, and listen to the words of the book of Proverbs.
Hear, O children, the instruction of a father, and give attention that you may gain understanding. Do not forsake wisdom, and she will guard you. Love wisdom, and she will watch over you. When you walk, your steps will not be impeded, and if you run, you will not stumble.
My children, give attention to my words. Incline your ear to my sayings. Do not let them depart from your sight. Keep them in the midst of your heart, for they are life to you who find them, and health to all your body.
Watch over your heart with all diligence, for from it flow the springs of life. Put away from you a deceitful mouth, and put devious speech far from your lips. Let your eyes look directly ahead. Watch the path of your feet. May all your ways be established. May it be, Lord Jesus. Amen.
We hope you enjoyed this message. Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Learn more at biola.edu.